We are your hosts. I am TJ Kern. That is Blake Hartsfield. Blake, man, been a little while since we've been able to get the pod out, man. I live in a house with some roommates here, and the flu was going around and couldn't stay healthy. And so I had to get out and haven't been back in my house for a couple weeks. And in the meantime, the Red Raiders have been playing some really good basketball.
Yeah, they have, TJ. They're on a roll. I think it's currently a 7-game winning streak. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 7-game winning streak. And frankly, if they're the best free throw shooting team in the conference, and if they could have knocked down a couple of free throws against Iowa State, it'd be a 10-game winning streak, and they'd be in first place outright. So they're playing excellent basketball. TJ McCaslin has totally done a 180 from the 0-2 start at home in conference play with the surprising loss to UCF and then the tough overtime loss to Iowa State in a game that, like I just said, you should have won. But undefeated on the road. I mean, what are the odds of that in the Big 12? So I know we got a lot to get into here.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one here on the Nation's official podcast. And man, I am so thrilled. Let's just start with giving him my guy some flowers because he's my guy. How about Chance McMillan right now? Dude is in fuego, leading the team in scoring over 15 a game. As a matter of fact, I mean, look, you've got Chance, JT, Darian, and then Elijah Hawkins at 9.6, and Christian Anderson really at 9. So, I mean, you basically have 5 guys that are getting you double figures, and I think that's what one of the funnest things about this team right now is.
Don't forget Kevin Overton. He's at 8.9, so that's basically 9. And he's a guy that can get you double digits on any given night.
And Fetty can get you double digits if there's some dunk.
Not often, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yes, there's been a few spike games there, but I mean, it's kind of a ceiling. But anyway,
he's a glue guy, TJ. He's a defense and rebound glue guy.
Yeah, no, what I love about this team is on any given night, you don't know where the offense is going to come from. You don't know when Christian Anderson's going to go for 20. Chance McMillan's going to go for 20. Darren Williams, 20. Toppin, 20. Even Elijah Hawkins been shooting the ball well in conference play. And that was something that we didn't know if he was going to be just only a facilitator, kind of a high assist guy. But he's actually shooting the ball pretty decent as well. I mean, this team is a lot of fun to watch right now, both offensively and defensively, being only the second team all season to hold Baylor under 60 points in their most recent game.
Yeah, TJ, they're playing awesome basketball. I'll start with your guy McMillan. I mean, what more can you say about him, TJ? He's the best shooter in the country. And you really see the growth in his game from this year to last year, right? Like last year, he was a good spot up, knockdown shooter if somebody could create some offense for him and kick it out and knock down shots. But his ability this year to be able to put the ball on the floor and create his own shot or get to the rim. And you saw that down the stretch in the Houston game, which I know we're going to talk about, where, he kind of took that game over. And then against Baylor the other night, I mean, it was, we played a good first half. We built a lead, and Baylor kind of made a little bit of a run, which you expected. Baylor's a good team, and they've kind of been bitten by the injury bug a little bit. So I think they're probably better than their record indicates. They made a little bit of run and make it close. And then, Scott Drew himself was asked about it in the postgame. He goes, look, McMillan got hot. And I mean, he hits 3 in a minute and a half, and the roof comes off the place. And then I don't know if you heard his comment about Tech as a whole, TJ, but I think you and I agree Scott Drew's a good coach. He knows what he's talking about. We might not like Baylor, but it's hard to not tip your hat to that guy with what he's been able to accomplish there. And his quote at the end of the game was, he goes, look, I don't want to put any pressure on Coach McCaslin or anything. He goes, but he's got himself a really good basketball team. And he goes, there's probably 3 or 4 teams right now in the Big 12 that can make a run in March to a Final Four if they get hot in the tournament. And he goes, Tech is absolutely one of those teams. And he said they're probably playing the best of anybody in the conference right now, which I think is absolutely the case. So the Red Raiders are rolling. You mentioned Elijah Hawkins, my guy. He seems to have figured it out a little bit. He's scoring. He's able to run the offense. TJ, his ability to change gears and speeds and just control the game, it has been really evident on this run. And then my other guy who, as I claimed at the beginning of last year, D5. What's amazing about this run to me, TJ, is that they're doing it kind of without D5. Not to say that D5 isn't playing well. I think he's playing kind of average for his game, but I think there's more there. And I think he's been battling through an ankle injury, but if he gets healthy, and can start being the D5, and he's still the guy they go to if they need a bucket, right? If he's in the game. But um, I think that there's more that you can squeeze out of that lemon, and you can get more from D5. And then the other guy, TJ, don't look now, but Kerwin Walton seems like he's
No, Kerwin Walton.
starting
Okay.
to slowly find his shot. And I know you're going to talk about Anderson. He's been awesome for a freshman, but Kerwin Walton seems like he's slowly starting to get his touch back. And um, if Kerwin Walton gets hot down this stretch here, watch out, because that's just yet another sniper that McCasland can put out there. And TJ, they can score offensively. They're really really good.
They're really good. They're a lot of fun to watch. The ball's moving everywhere. Um, Man, and let's just go ahead and bring up that freshman Christian Anderson. What he's been able to do and the ceiling that he adds to this team is a guy that can get hot and, like I said, on any given night, pop off for 20, shooting 40% from three. And I know the coaching staff is really excited about his development so far.
TJ, he's so much further along than I would have ever guessed. I know coming into the season that the coaching staff was like, "Oh, we really like Christian Anderson, and Christian Anderson's going to have a role on this team," but he's a true freshman, so I kind of, okay, yeah, you like him, maybe he gives you 10 minutes a night and get you, a bucket here or there. Never in my wildest dreams did I expect we were going to get this, a guy who can handle 20 to 25 minutes a night, that can be a legitimate two guard next to Elijah Hawkins, that they can play together in different lineups. And he's fantastic. TJ, he's fearless, man. That kid's a gunner. He is not afraid. If he misses six in a row, the next one's going up with confidence, like he's not missed at all. So you love to see that from a freshman, and he's way better than advertised.
Yeah, no, the confidence with which he shoots it. I mean, it's almost like if he gets 2 feet, 3 feet of space, I expect it to go in. Like he's shooting the ball that well,
Yeah, yeah, he's outstanding. And
and then his
TJ,
defense,
yeah,
his
he's
defense has
good.
been really good.
He's buckled down on that end of the floor. And I know, what on our last pod we really got on this team about the defense and their inability to guard on the perimeter. Credit to the guys on the floor, right? Elijah Hawkins, Christian Anderson, Kevin Overton, I think, is probably still their best on ball defender. Um, D5, McMillan, they're all putting out the effort on the defensive end. But I think you got to give this coaching staff a lot of credit too. They've totally changed, and that's really hard to do, to change your defensive philosophy and scheme from what they were doing, and to try to do that midseason is almost impossible. And they've made it look easy. TJ, they're ball hedging everything. They're doing a hard hedge. They're forcing guys around. They're not switching nearly as much as they did, and it's working. TJ, right now I'm looking at the Kim Palm ratings. They're number 8 overall in Kim Palm, which is just, I mean, phenomenal, right? They're number 11 in offensive efficiency, so they're a top offensive team in the country. But TJ, they're 27th now in defensive efficiency, and I know that you're not as much of an analytics guy as me, but in the last 25 years, 24 of the 25 national champions have had a top 30 offense and defense. And I think the Red Raiders are one of about 8 teams right now that have both of that. So they are absolutely a threat come March, and they fit the profile, quote unquote, of a national champion. Not saying they're going to win the national championship, but they fit the profile analytically of a national champion.
And you have to love the growth that we've seen throughout this season, because at the beginning of the year, with the lack of really a challenging schedule, we knew they were talented. We knew they had some talent on this team. And then, of course, they lose to St. Joe's at the bucket at the end. They lose to A&M without JT Toppin. Then they blow that game to UCF, first conference game, and we just weren't too sure, what this team was going to do. But game in and game out, they're continuing to get better.
Yeah, TJ, and not only were we,
Best
wondering
start in
about.
school history, the Big 12 play.
Oh, absolutely. Not only were we wondering, we knew they were talented, and they had a little bit of rough start. TJ, let's call a spade a spade. That with their non-conference and then losing to UCF, when they were going into game 2 of the Big 12, they were very on the wrong side of the bubble, because their non-conference schedule was so bad. They didn't have a quad 1 win at that point on the season. And TJ, they've gone from the wrong side of the bubble 8 games ago or 9 games ago, I'm sorry, to I mean, a lot of the really good bracketologists have them as at worst a 4. A lot of them have them as a 3 and pushing the 2 line. And um, they've got the best win of anybody in the country. Okay, like what they did in Houston. And I know we're going to talk about that game specifically, but that win at Houston, people need to understand. Houston had the longest home winning streak in the country until Tech beat them. They had won like 38 games in a row at home at the Ferreira Center. Um, no one in the country has a win better than that. That is a quad 1A plus plus win. And that win probably single handedly moved them up 2 or 3 lines on the seed line. And it is the best win in the country to date that anybody has.
And let's get into that game because I was watching and um all of a sudden I look up. I was at a buddy's house. We were watching the Royal Rumble and we had the split screen on. So we had the Royal Rumble on and we had the Tech game on. And we're watching the game, whatever, but we didn't have the sound on the Tech game at the moment. All of a sudden I'm looking over and the game had just started and McCaslin's blowing a gasket. And I did not see the play live. All of a sudden, of course, everybody that watched the game knows what happened, what I'm talking about. JT Toppin was thrown out of the game, called for a flagrant 2 kick to the groin area while trying to pass the ball to a teammate. I mean, it was obviously not malicious. And Coach McCaslin then blows his gasket. He gets thrown out. So now you're without arguably your best player, your most talented player, and your head coach. And you got to give Coach McCaslin a lot of credit for going and getting the assistant from Wyoming. That what's his name?
Linder,
What's his
Linder, I believe.
Linder. The assistant coach there that kept this team together.
Yeah, TJ. I know we're not big referees guys now. I think we've talked about it a couple times in football, like the Colorado game, and I think there was a K State football game last year where there was a couple of egregious calls. But TJ, this one, and I think a basketball game last year against Kansas at home where our guy got hacked. But um, I don't say this lightly, TJ. That is the worst call I have ever seen on a basketball court, pro, college, period. Right? To call a flagrant 2, and McCaslin, to his in his genius in the post game press conference when was asked about the play, he was explaining that he's getting double teamed, he's trying to throw a skip pass, and he got a Patrick Mahomes reference in there. He's like, maybe we need to call Patrick Mahomes because when you're trying to throw a ball and you've got to change direction, you got to create leverage to throw the ball, which is why the leg came out. TJ, for them to call a flagrant 2 and to throw Toppin out of the game was just it was horrible. Kirby Hocutt immediately tweeted about it and said that he had talked during the game and said he had talked to Yormark and that Yormark had assured him that it was a terrible call and that there was going to be accountability with the officials. I've never seen Hocutt do that during a game. That's how
But
bad this was.
it was such a big game and all the lead up and such an important game to
Yeah.
then have Toppin immediately ejected and Coach McCaslin
Well,
gone.
and McCaslin, he said, "Look, I to this in his press conference, he said, I still can't tell you why JT was thrown out of the game. I can tell you exactly why I was thrown out of the game." He goes, "I deserved it," but he goes, "I was trying to get tossed." And look, I at some point as a coach in basketball, and TJ, you know this, right? And most of our listeners who are high level basketball people know this that at some point as a coach, you got to stick up for your guys. And I think him getting tossed actually helped the team, right? Because it sent a message to the officials that this is ridiculous. It sent a message to every other guy on that bench that was still in that game that your head coach has got your back no matter what. And he was livid, TJ. He was saying that's basketball. There's no way you can even call a flagrant 1, let alone a flagrant 2 on that play. And the guy from Houston's flopping around on the floor acting like he died. It was a horrible call. There's no other way to cut that. But look, you got to give this team a lot of credit. I mean, for them to rally from that, right? You lose JT Toppin early in the game. They got in foul trouble, right? D5 ends up fouling out. I think Elijah Hawkins ended up fouling out in overtime, and they found a way. McCaslin always preaches toughest teams wins, and it's hard to out tough Houston, right? You might be able to like outshoot or out skill, quote unquote, Houston, but trying to out tough that team is not easy to do, and that's exactly what the Red Raiders did. They refused to lose in that game, and Coach Sampson talked about it in his press conference. He's like, "Look, I think first off, the Toppin kid should have never gotten kicked out." He goes, "I understand why Coach McCaslin was upset," and he goes, "But I think it rallied their team." And you got to give guys like McMillan and D5 and Elijah Hawkins and Frederico, who was outstanding in that game, a lot of credit.
No doubt about it. And one of the things that has me so excited is the fact that they seem to love playing together. The chemistry on this team is really coming along. And Blake, it doesn't the Big 12 doesn't rest. As Saturday night, we got some late night hoops out in the desert with a huge rematch at Arizona. Of course, the Red Raiders took care of business on their home court, but now they have to go to Arizona and play.
Yeah, TJ, look, I never am going to pick them to lose, especially after beating Houston. I think that this is a game they can absolutely go win, but if they lose this game, who cares, right? Like if you lose at Arizona and that's the end of your winning streak, who cares? Arizona's really good. They're playing at home. That's a tough place to play. Um, I'm just looking at this schedule, TJ, and I mean they're currently 9-2, 18-4 overall. Um, if they just win the games they're supposed to win, right, the rest of the way. So you go at Arizona, flip a coin. Arizona State at home, you probably are going to win that game. At Oklahoma State, who's horrible, you're probably going to win that game. At TCU, you're probably going
That's
to
a
win
home
that
game.
game. Yeah, it's a home game, right? In Fort Worth. You're probably going to win, especially with TCU not being very good. Their fans certainly aren't going to show up. So that's going to be all Red Raiders. West Virginia at home, probably feel pretty good about that game. So that's four more, right? Just from those four. So that gets you to, even if you lose to Arizona. So now you're at 13-3. Then you get Houston at home and at Kansas. Okay, flip a coin in those two games. But let's just play devil's advocate and say worst case scenario. So you lose both of those games. So now you're 13-5, right? And then you finish it up with Colorado, who's the worst team in the league in Lubbock. You're going to win that game, and then at Arizona State. So like, if you just win the games you're supposed to and don't win any of the coin flips, and they can win any game on their schedule at this point, you get to 15 Big 12 wins. If you get to 15 Big 12 wins, you're at worst a 3 seed, and you might be a 2 seed. And if you win a couple of those coin flip games, they might push the top of the 2, bottom of the 1 line, TJ, especially if they make a run in Kansas City. So what they've been able to accomplish is you can't put it into words how impressive it has been. And to your point, you talked about wanting to play together, TJ. It reminds, and I don't say this lightly, but it reminds me of the 2018-2019 team that went all the way to the overtime of the national championship game, where they kept getting better through January and kept getting better through February. And there was just this togetherness and this camaraderie. And when you watch that team play, TJ, I think if you remember that year, as a fan, whenever you'd sit down and watch that game, you just had a confidence that they were going to find a way, right? Every game that like they were going to be in the game, they were going to find a way. And that's kind of what it's starting to feel like with this team, especially with like the Houston win. And it's like, man, they're so well coached. They play so well together, and they've got good leadership in Hawkins as a senior, and they've got talent and shooters all over the floor. And the difference in this team and the 2018-2019 team is that team was elite defensively and good offensively. And this team's the opposite, right? This team's elite offensively and good defensively. But if you remember what wins in the tournament, typically, it's teams with good guards that can make shots. And that's exactly what they are.
Yeah, I mean, those beard teams. Some of those teams weren't that fun to watch, going 5, 6, 7 minutes without a bucket. But
This
first to
team
50
can do that on
wins.
occasion. I mean, they've had stretches where they go 4 and 5 minutes, but when they are flowing and they get it going, man, like their ability to just blitz people, where like they can go on these, I've always talked, and you've heard me talk about the patented Kansas run, where they go on these 15-2 runs, and it happens in like 2 minutes where they knock down 3 or 4. Like that's what this team does to people, right? Like they get hot from 3 and they knock 3 or 4 of them down in 5 possessions, and all of a sudden a 3-point game and you look up and it's a 13-point game and the game's over, right? And so like that's what they can do to people.
Yeah, and of course, I love the 3-point shooting. I love the fact that this team's going to get them up. I know that I love the fact that we've got shooters all over the floor. It reminds me of that Baylor team that we played a few years ago that ended
Mhm.
up going to the national title and winning. Um,
It's exactly who they
just,
remind you of. They're
just had
very
shooters
similar.
everywhere. Yeah,
And good enough defensively, right? Like top 30 defensively. Like I said, Baylor was in that profile. But elite offensively, and that's a really good comp, TJ. I hadn't even thought of that, but that's a really good comp. Is that Baylor team that won the national championship? That, and again, like you 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 watch them play, and it's a 3 4 point game, and then they go on one of these little spurts where they hit 3 or 4 threes in about a minute and a half, and you look up and the game's over. And they do it every night, so it's
and Chance
really
McMillan did it
impressive.
by himself the other night.
Yeah, he really did, and so they're really good, TJ. They're really, really, really good.
Yeah, and it's been a lot of fun. I told my buddy early on in the season. I said, "Hey, kind of hint, like you may want to watch Tech this year in some hoops."
Yeah.
He's been watching and texting me during all the games and stuff, and he's like, "Oh man, like they're playing really good. You were right." And I was like, "Yeah, man, like." Kind of had a feeling this team would be talented, but they're even exceeding where I thought they'd be at this point in time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would have been happy, TJ, as we sit here with them having played 11 conference games, they're 9-2, obviously going to Arizona. I would have been happy with 7-4, right?
Hmm.
Like even 6-5, if depending on who the six wins were, like you could have lived with that. You're, rolling towards a 7 or an 8 seed, maybe a 6 seed if you get hot down the stretch. To be 9-2, 18-4 overall, a definitely on the top 4 seed lines, pushing the 3 or the 2 line, depending on who you look at. Like all the credit in the world to these guys. And sit back, put your feet up, and enjoy the ride the rest of the way, because this group is, like I said, they remind you so much of that 18-19 team, and just their togetherness, how they continue to get better, right, throughout the grind of the Big 12. Um, and you just have a confidence watching them that, like, even when they start games slow, right? And there've been a couple of games in this stretch where they've started slow and found themselves even in a little bit of a hole, and you just have this confidence that, like, hey, they're going to figure it out, right? Like they're going to get going, they're going to make a run, they're going to knock down some shots. Um, and the beautiful thing is, like, if a guy like McMillan doesn't have it one night, you can bring in Kevin Overton, who can shoot it at 38%, or you can bring in Kerwin Walton, who we all know can, if he gets hot, can fill it up, or Christian Anderson or D5 can shoot it. Like they've got 6 or 7 guys that all shoot it at 35% or better. And then I know they lost the Iowa State game, right? Because they can't shoot
But
free
they
throws,
they
but
dominated that game.
they dominated the game, right? And where I was going with that, though, is like there's going to be a game in the tournament, right, where you get into a close game where you're going to have to make free throws to win that game. And this team shoots free throws. They're really good at it, TJ. They're the best in the Big 12. They've got like 5 guys that shoot at 85% or better. Hawkins is leading the way at 91%. Like you got confidence they can close games out and close games. And um, that's going to pay dividends. Their ability to shoot free throws. I know they lost the Iowa State game because they couldn't make free throws, but their ability to knock down free throws is going to pay dividends in the tournament. I'm telling you, it's going to happen.
I mean, that's knocking down those free throws late and going by those percentages. You got 4 guys there at 80% or higher with McMillan that you're comfortable with, D5 you're comfortable with, of course Elijah Hawkins you're comfortable with. I'm comfortable with Christian Anderson shooting free throws. Um,
Kerwin Walton.
Really, the only guy I'm not comfortable with is Fetty. You're
Yeah, I
like, if
mean,
Fetty can give you a one,
yeah, if well, every time Fetty is a lot like Norrance was, right? Where like he goes to the line, it's an adventure, and you're like, hey, knock down one big fella, because there's a lot of over trips there, right? Over twos, but give me one big fella. But Toppin isn't great. He's good enough, right? I think he's in the 70s. In fact, I've got it here. If you give me just a second. Okay, so Hawkins is at 90, McMillan's at 87, D5's at 84, Kerwin Walton's at 81, Christian Anderson's at 75, Kevin Overton's at 75. So like you've got a bunch of dudes, right, that you can put in at the end of the game that, like, hey, I've got confidence they can go up and make a big free throw. But I think at the end of the day, TJ, if it's really a clutch free throw in the tournament, it's hard for me, especially since he's your point guard. Like, it's hard for me to not just put the ball in Elijah Hawkins' hands at 91% and say, go knock two down, right? He's your best ball handler. He's going to get the ball. Um, he's a senior. He's been there. He's done that. Like, hey, little man, go knock down two free throws, close this game out.
Yeah, and I mean, we're sitting here giving a lot of flowers on the nation's official podcast with TJ and Blake talking about this.
100% deserved.
I mean, well deserved all around. And we haven't gotten to do a pod in a long time. And this team deserves every single bit of flowers we're throwing their way right now. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of fun to watch. The big game coming up Saturday, we're going to have to stay up late for that one. But like you said, I hadn't really taken a deep dive into the schedule. It opens up after that. So, I
That's what I'm
mean,
saying. Like, they had this really tough 3-game stretch, right? Like, they took care of business in the games leading into the at Houston, home against Baylor, at Arizona, right? Where, like, you came into this 3-game stretch and you're like, man, if they get one, like, even if it's just Baylor at home, like, you can kind of live with that. But then you go steal the game at Houston and the rest is gravy, right? Because that's the best win of anybody in the country. Um, they've won 7 in a row. At some point, they're going to drop a Big 12 game. I don't think they're going to run the table. They could. I'm not saying that they can't, but there are good teams in the Big 12, right? They still got to go to Kansas, and I know
yeah,
Kansas
I
is
was going to
kind
say
of
Fog Allen.
well. I know Kansas is kind of up and down this year. They're still really good, and I'm never going to pick them to win in Lawrence, right? Like, I won't pick them to lose, but I'm not going to go pick them to win in Lawrence because that's just such a tough place to go play. Arizona's kind of like that, so the odds are they're not going to run the table. But if they lose this game, who cares? Like,
Yeah.
who
No, I mean,
cares? Like, I'd
they're
love to
on a
have
good
it.
path.
I'd love to have it, and I think they've got a really good chance to win this game. But if they lose, who cares? Like, even if they lose and it's,
Even if they get boat raced, who
yeah,
cares?
even if you get boat raced on, who cares? Like, turn around and go beat Oklahoma State and you're back right on track. So, um, enjoy the ride because this team's really, really good.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it, Blake. And before we get out of here, man, it is Super Bowl week, and our Red Raider is back again to another Super Bowl, and Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs going for that three-peat.
They're gonna get it, TJ. They're gonna win this football game. I think this, and some of our listeners know this, but I adopted the Chiefs as my second favorite team the day they drafted Pat. I watch every game. I consider myself a part of Chiefs Nation. Like I said, I don't miss any games, and I root for them with my heart, like I root for the Red Raiders, the Cowboys. And with as frustrating as the Cowboys are right now, it's kind of easy to just root for the Chiefs and forget about Dallas because they're just such a disaster. But TJ, Super Bowls typically come down to two things. They come down to coaching and quarterback play. And the Chiefs have got the best coach in the league, right? And Andy Reid, and they've got the best quarterback in the league in Patrick Mahomes. And this just kind of feels inevitable. I know Philadelphia is good, and I hate the Eagles as a Cowboys fan, but it's going to be a close game. But this is what the Chiefs do. They win close games and they make plays when they need to do it. And I think they're going to get it done in three-peat. And I think at that point, if they three-peat, the conversation of Mahomes versus Brady, I think, gets very, very loud. And I think it's absolutely a conversation at that point.
No doubt about that. I've done the same as a Cowboy fan, as a Red Raider. As soon as Pat got to Kansas City, it was like, all right, let's see, let's take this ride. And man, he boy is he taking us on a fun ride here, going for the three-peat. I hope they get it done. I know Vegas has it as what about a 1 point game right now?
It opened at 2.5. It's down to 1.5. TJ, I think there's going to be some big money that comes in on Kansas City late here. So if you want to bet the Chiefs, I would do it here in the next day or two. I think come Saturday and then into Sunday morning, you're going to get a lot of the sharps coming in on Kansas City, and that line's going to move back to 2.5, maybe even 3 by close. So if you want Kansas City, I would take it now while it's at 1.5 because, and I did, I took it earlier this week at 1.5. But I just think they're going to get it done, TJ. I think Pat's on a mission. I think Andy's on a mission. And to your point about us adopting the Chiefs, TJ, it's really easy to do because they're in the AFC. They never play the Cowboys except once every 4 years. Like, it's been a fun ride. And I can't wait for the game on Sunday evening.
That makes two of us, man. So we're looking forward to seeing if Pat can go get him another ring and kick our feet back and see how this Red Raider ride goes as we get into February and March here as the calendar continues to turn here in 2025. So, Blake,
Yep.
anything else before we get out of here?
Nah, man, I think that's about it.
All right, everybody. Well, we appreciate you tuning in as always. And Blake, how do we always get out of here?
Wreck 'em.
Wreck 'em. We will talk to you guys next week on the Nation's official podcast.